The Power of Perspective. A story about challenging assumptions and bias. The sun beat down mercilessly on the dusty, deserted street, causing the asphalt to shimmer in the midday heat. Sarah walked slowly, taking in the sights and sounds of the unfamiliar neighborhood. It was a far cry from her own, with run-down buildings and peeling paint. As she approached a corner, she heard raised voices and turned to see two men arguing. One of the men was tall and muscular, with a shaved head and a fierce scowl. The other was shorter and more wiry, with greasy hair and a nervous twitch. They were standing nose to nose, their fists clenched, and Sarah could sense the tension building between them. "Hey, what's going on?" she asked, her voice loud and clear. The two men turned to look at her, surprise registering on their faces. The taller man took a step back, his expression softening. "Nothing, miss. Just a little disagreement." Sarah looked from one man to the other, studying their faces. She could see the anger and fear in the shorter man's eyes and the simmering violence in the taller man's, but she could also sense something else, something more subtle. "Why don't you tell me what's really going on?" she said, her voice calm but firm. The two men hesitated, glancing at each other uncertainly. But something in Sarah's demeanor seemed to reassure them, and the shorter man spoke up. "He accused me of stealing his wallet," he said, his voice shaking. The taller man snorted. "And he did. I saw him do it." Sarah raised an eyebrow. "Is that true?" she asked the shorter man. He hesitated for a moment, then nodded slowly. "Yes. But I was desperate. I needed the money to feed my family." The taller man sneered. "That's no excuse. He's a thief, plain and simple." Sarah looked at the two men, then sighed. "Look, I'm not going to judge either of you. But I do know this. There's always another way. Maybe if you had talked to each other, you could have found a solution that didn't involve violence or theft." The two men looked at each other again, then nodded. "You're right, miss. We're sorry." As Sarah turned to leave, she heard the taller man speak up again. "Hey, what's your name?" She paused, then turned back to face him. "Sarah," she said. The man nodded. "Thanks, Sarah. You taught us something today." As Sarah walked away, she felt a sense of satisfaction. It wasn't often that she got involved in other people's problems, but something about the two men had touched her. Maybe it was the realization that everyone had their own struggles and hardships, and that a little compassion and understanding could go a long way. Next day, Sarah sat at her desk, staring at the blank computer screen in front of her. She had been trying to write a novel for months now, but every time she sat down to write, the words seemed to elude her. She had tried different genres and styles, but nothing seemed to click. As she sat there, lost in thought, her phone buzzed. It was her friend Lisa, inviting her to a party that night. Sarah hesitated for a moment, then sighed and accepted. Maybe a change of scenery would help clear her head. The party was in full swing when Sarah arrived. The music was loud, the drinks were flowing, and people were dancing and laughing. Sarah tried to join in, but she felt out of place. She didn't know anyone except Lisa, and even she seemed to be having a great time without her. As Sarah sat in a corner, nursing her drink, she noticed a man watching her from across the room. He was tall and lanky, with shaggy brown hair and a crooked smile. She recognized him vaguely from somewhere, but couldn't place him. After a few minutes of staring, the man sauntered over to her. "Hey there," he said, his voice smooth and easy. "Mind if I join you?" Sarah shrugged. "Sure, why not?" They sat there in silence for a moment, sipping their drinks. Sarah felt awkward and uncomfortable, unsure of what to say. The man seemed to sense her discomfort. "So, you're a writer, huh?" he said, nodding towards her laptop bag. Sarah nodded. "Yeah, I guess you could say that. Or at least I'm trying to be." The man smiled. "I know how that feels. I'm an artist myself, painting mostly." Sarah perked up at this. "Really? That's interesting. What kind of stuff do you paint?" The man launched into a description of his work. Abstract, colorful, expressive. Sarah listened, fascinated, as he talked about his inspiration and process. As they talked, Sarah found herself opening up to the man. She told him about her struggles with writing and how she felt like she was never going to be good enough. The man listened sympathetically, nodding and offering words of encouragement. "You know what your problem is," he said, grinning. "You're too hard on yourself. You need to let go of all those preconceived notions of what a writer should be and just write from the heart. Don't worry about what anyone else thinks. Just be true to yourself." Sarah looked at him, surprised by the wisdom of his words. "You know, you're right. I think I've been so caught up in trying to write the perfect novel that I've lost sight of why I wanted to write in the first place." The man nodded. "It happens to the best of us. But you have to remember that creativity is all about taking risks and challenging yourself. If you're not willing to put yourself out there, you'll never know what you're capable of." Sarah smiled, feeling a sense of excitement building within her. Maybe, just maybe, this man had given her the push she needed to get back to writing. As the night wore on, Sarah and the man talked and laughed, swapping stories and getting to know each other. Sarah felt a sense of camaraderie with him, as if they were kindred spirits. As the party began to wind down, the man stood up. "Well, it's been great talking to you, Sarah. I hope we can do it again sometime." Sarah nodded, feeling a pang of regret that the night was over. "Yeah, me too. Hey, what's your name, by the way?" The man grinned. "Oh, sorry, I'm Jack." As Jack walked away, Sarah felt a sense of satisfaction. Maybe it was the alcohol talking, but she felt like she had made a real connection with someone, and for the first time in a long time, she felt like writing again. Over the next few weeks, Sarah threw herself into her writing with renewed energy. Inspired by Jack's words, she wrote without worrying about whether it was good enough or not. She wrote for the joy of it, and it felt wonderful. One day, as she was walking through the park, she heard someone call her name. It was Jack, jogging towards her with a wide grin on his face. "Hey, Sarah, fancy meeting you here." Sarah smiled back. "Hey, Jack, what are you up to?" "Not much. Just out for a run. What about you?" "I'm just taking a break from writing for a bit. I needed some fresh air." Jack nodded. "I hear that. Sometimes you need to clear your head and get some perspective. Speaking of which, have you heard of the power of perspective?" Sarah shook her head. "No, what's that?" Jack launched into an explanation, his hands gesturing animatedly as he spoke. Sarah listened, captivated by his words. "Basically, it's all about challenging your assumptions and biases," Jack said. "We all have these preconceived notions about the world and the people in it, but if you can step back and see things from a different angle, it can change everything." Sarah nodded, feeling a sense of recognition. Jack's words resonated with her on a deep level. "You know," Jack said, "I've been thinking about something. I have a friend who's a photographer, and I think you two would get along great. She's all about challenging perceptions and showing the world in a new light." Sarah's ears perked up. "Really? That sounds amazing. I'd love to meet her." Jack grinned. "Great, I'll set something up." And so it was that Sarah found herself sitting in a coffee shop a few days later, sipping a latte and chatting with Jack's friend, a woman named Maya. Maya was everything Jack had said she was: passionate, insightful, and deeply creative. As they talked, Maya showed Sarah some of her photographs. Stunning, thought-provoking images that challenged Sarah's assumptions about the world. Sarah found herself feeling inspired all over again, and when Maya suggested they collaborate on a project, she jumped at the chance. Over the next few months, Sarah worked with Maya on the project, writing stories to accompany Maya's photographs. It was an incredible experience, challenging, rewarding, and deeply fulfilling. As the project came to a close, Sarah sat back and reflected on everything that had happened. She had started out feeling lost and directionless, but through the power of perspective, she had found her way back to her passion. And it was all thanks to Jack, the man she had met at a party, who had opened her eyes to a new way of seeing the world. As Sarah sat there, lost in thought, her phone buzzed. It was a message from Jack, asking if she wanted to meet up for a drink. Sarah grinned, feeling a sense of warmth in her chest. She had a feeling that this was the start of a beautiful friendship.